The Holloway house had always felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that seemed to press against the walls and seep into the lungs of anyone who entered. On the surface, it looked like any other weather-beaten farmhouse standing at the edge of the woods, its porch sagging, its roof patched so many times it resembled a half-forgotten quilt. But inside, the silence hummed, soft, steady, unnatural. Most people who visited claimed they heard nothing. Yet Elias Holloway heard everything. The creaks that didn't match the wind. The faint thuds beneath the floorboards at night. The low murmurs that drifted up from the cellar when the house was supposed to be sleeping. Every Holloway son had slept down there. It was a rule, as strict as it was strange. Once a boy turned 13, his bedroom door upstairs was locked, and he was moved into the cellar with only a thin mattress and a lantern that never seemed to cast enough light. It was an old family tradition, passed down like a duty, spoken with a seriousness that suggested consequences too dark to name. Elias's older brothers had accepted it with bowed heads and tight lips. His father said it was just the way things were. His mother never said anything at all. But the night Elias first stepped into the cellar, the air felt wrong, thick, warm in places where it shouldn't be, like something was breathing just beneath the floor. The room smelled faintly of wet soil and something older, something metallic and restless. He tried to sleep, but each time he closed his eyes, he felt a gentle tremor beneath him, as though the house itself had a heartbeat. Sometimes he thought he heard whispers drifting through the cracks in the stone, too soft to understand yet too deliberate to ignore. By the third night, Elias noticed the warm patch, one square of the wooden floor that felt almost alive under his palm. It pulsed faintly when he touched it, like the skin of some hidden thing trying not to be noticed. He told himself it was just his imagination, that the stories about the woods and the disappearances were just old tales meant to scare children. But the truth was simpler and far more terrifying. Something was beneath him. Something the family had put there. Something that was waiting. And as he lay in the darkness, lantern faintly flickering, Elias realized that the cellar wasn't just a place the Holloway sons slept. It was the place they were being kept. Explores the generations-old rule that every Holloway son must sleep in the cellar from the moment he turns 13, a rule woven so deeply into the family's identity that questioning it feels like breaking a sacred oath. The tradition is older than any living Holloway, older even than the current farmhouse itself, passed down with the same stern gravity as a warning rather than a simple custom. For the townspeople who know of it, the rule is dismissed as an eccentric family quirk, one more oddity to add to the list of strange stories whispered about the Holloway property at the edge of the woods. But inside the family, the rule carries a weight that goes beyond ritual. Fathers pass it to their sons with grave, tired eyes, and mothers avoid the subject entirely, as though speaking about it might wake something that shouldn't be disturbed. The boys who undergo the transition do so in silence, moving their belongings downstairs without complaint, accepting the cellar as their new world because resistance feels both futile and dangerous. 4 generations, the Holloway sons have endured their nights in the cold, damp darkness without ever being told why it had to be this way. They learned early that curiosity brought consequences. Any question met with their father's sharp stare or the sudden tightening of his jaw was abandoned quickly. The boys knew only 2 laws: they must sleep in the cellar, and they must never, under any circumstances, try to uncover what lay beneath it. This vague warning was delivered more like a threat than advice, and though none of the sons knew precisely what it meant, they felt the danger of it in the marrow of their bones. Over time, the rule stopped feeling strange and became simply a part of being a Holloway, the same way other families passed down heirlooms or stories. The cellar was their inheritance. Generations of boys grew into men who avoided the topic entirely, refusing to speak of the nights they spent in the dense, suffocating dark. They carried the unease with them for the rest of their lives, settling into adulthood with shadows behind their eyes and a reluctance to explain why. The tradition formed a quiet bond between them, a shared secret formed not by choice but by survival. Each man knew that the rule had not been invented out of superstition or cruelty but necessity. Something had happened long ago, something powerful enough that the family's only solution was to train every son to sleep underground, close to the thing they were meant to guard, or perhaps to keep asleep, a responsibility passed down like a burden rather than a privilege. Delves into the unsettling relationship between the Holloway property and the stretch of dense, ancient woods that border it, a place locals treat with a mixture of caution and superstition. The forest has always held a reputation for swallowing things whole: animals, travelers, even the occasional drifter whose absence was quietly accepted as another chapter in the town's folklore. Whispers float through generations about strange lights flickering between the trees, distant screams echoing on windless nights, and shapes that move with an intelligence that is neither human nor animal. Children are warned not to wander too close, and adults who walk the forest paths do so only during daylight, and even then with an unease that tightens their steps. It is said that the woods are older than the town itself, older than the land's records, and that every tree seems to lean slightly toward the Holloway house, as if pulled by some unseen gravity rooted deep beneath the soil. The Holloway family has always lived at the edge of this unsettling boundary, their home appearing almost too close to the tree line, like a structure caught in a slow, quiet struggle between man and nature. Some of the oldest townspeople claim that the family chose the location deliberately, insisting it offered protection, though no one can agree on what exactly they were protecting themselves from. Others believe the cellar and its strange function were created not to shield the family from the woods but to shield the woods from something beneath the house. The stories contradict each other, but they all carry the same tone of unease, as if the truth is something no one wants to speak aloud. Strangers who visit the Holloway property often mention an odd shift in the air as they approach, a prickling on the back of the neck like being watched from all angles at once. The forest seems to listen. The wind there behaves differently, too quiet at times, too sharp at others, moving in directions that don't match the rest of the valley. The Holloway sons grow up hearing murmured warnings and half-finished sentences about the woods, but no one ever explains anything directly. Their fathers tell them to avoid the tree line at night. Their mothers shut the windows if they hear rustling after dark. Yet the family never leaves. No matter how strange the land becomes or how many stories accumulate over the decades, the Holloways remain rooted in place, as if bound by something stronger than fear. Over time, the connection between the cellar and the woods becomes an unspoken understanding, a quiet thread tying two mysteries together. The rule about sleeping underground and the rumors of disappearances in the forest seem to echo each other, forming a dark symmetry that suggests one truth: whatever haunts the woods and whatever lies beneath the house are not separate. They are part of the same story, one that the Holloway family has spent generations trying to contain. Centers on Elias Holloway's early nights in the cellar and the strange sensation that something beneath the floor is moving, breathing, or alive in a way no structure should be. Unlike his older brothers, who seem to accept the cellar's atmosphere with a numb, resigned silence, Elias feels every shift in the darkness with heightened sensitivity. From the moment he lies down on the thin mattress placed in the center of the stone room, he notices the faint vibration traveling up through the wood and into his bones. It is rhythmic, deliberate, and too steady to be the house settling. At first, he tells himself it must be the old furnace rattling somewhere in the walls, but the sound isn't metallic or mechanical. It's organic in a way he can't explain, like listening to a heartbeat through a wall of dirt. Some nights the vibration is gentle, barely noticeable unless he's perfectly still. Other nights, it grows powerful enough to make the lantern light tremble, causing shadows to slither across the stone walls in slow, crawling movements. Elias tries to convince himself that he's imagining it, that the fear of sleeping underground is playing tricks on him, but the cellar has a way of stripping away rational explanations. When the house upstairs grows silent and the world outside fades to a distant hush, the only thing left is the steady throb beneath him. It never matches the rhythm of his own pulse, nor does it resemble any animal he's ever known. It reminds him of something enormous buried deep below, something older than the farmhouse, older than the woods, vibrating through layers of earth as though straining to reach the surface. What unsettles Elias most is how easily the rest of the family ignores it. When he mentions the tremors in passing, his brothers grow tense, offering only quick glances toward the cellar door before changing the subject. His father becomes stone-faced and tells him to get used to it in a voice that carries both warning and exhaustion. His mother avoids the discussion entirely, though her eyes betray a fear she tries and fails to hide. Their reactions only deepen Elias's dread. If they have all felt it, if every son before him has heard the breathing floor, why does no one speak of it? Why do they accept it as normal? As days turn into nights and nights into long, anxious hours in the dark, Elias comes to understand that the vibration isn't random. It grows stronger in his presence, almost responsive. It intensifies when he steps near the warm patch of floor he tries so hard not to touch. He begins to feel as though the thing beneath him knows he is there, knows he is awake, and is waiting for him to listen more closely. The cellar is no longer simply a place to sleep. It is a threshold, and whatever lies beneath is stirring in ways the Holloways have hoped for generations to prevent. Focuses on Elias's discovery of the strange, forbidden spot on the cellar floor, a patch of wood that feels alive beneath his touch and radiates a warmth completely out of place in the cold, stone-lined room. Elias finds it by accident at first, stumbling upon it during one of his restless nights when sleep refuses to settle. The cellar floor is always frigid, the air heavy with dampness, but this one plank carries a faint heat, as if something beneath it gives off its own pulse. At first, Elias pulls his hand away, startled by the difference. Then he reaches out again, pressing his fingertips into the wood, and feels a subtle throb travel up his arm like a weak heartbeat struggling to rise from a deep slumber. He sits back quickly, telling himself it has to be a trick of his imagination, but the warmth lingers on his skin long after he moves away. As the nights pass, Elias becomes increasingly aware of the spot, unable to ignore it even when he tries. When he lies perfectly still, he notices the pulses more clearly, a slow, rhythmic movement that seems to respond to vibrations in the room, almost as though the thing beneath the floor is listening. Some nights it remains faint, barely noticeable. Other nights the pulsing grows stronger, matching neither the beat of the house nor any natural sound he's ever heard. The warm patch becomes the center of his anxiety, drawing his attention like a magnet he desperately wishes he could resist. He avoids stepping on it, walking around it in wide arcs as if moving too close might provoke something. Yet he cannot stop glancing at it, cannot stop feeling as though the wood is watching him in return. Elias attempts to tell himself it is just a flaw in the foundation, maybe a pocket of trapped heat from old piping or some quirk in the house's construction. But the Holloway house does not have systems that modern, logical explanations can justify. The cellar has always been a place of shadows and weight, not warmth. Every Holloway son has slept on that floor, but none have spoken of this spot, and Elias begins to wonder if they all feared it too, if they all pressed their hands to it at some point and felt the same pulse rising from below. When Elias gathers the courage to mention it to his father, the man's reaction is immediate and unnervingly sharp. His father freezes, his expression collapsing into a controlled panic, and he orders Elias not to step on that part of the floor again. He says it too quickly, too forcefully, as though he has been waiting years for someone to bring it up and praying that moment would never come. The warning makes everything worse. Elias senses that this patch of floor is the reason the cellar sleeping tradition exists, the reason his family has bound its sons to this underground space for so many generations. Whatever lies beneath that warm plank is not simply part of the house. It is older, deeper, and awake enough to notice him. Centers on Elias's discovery of his great-grandfather's old diary, a fragile and dust-covered artifact that becomes the first written clue hinting at the truth his family has been hiding for generations. He finds it tucked behind a loose stone in the cellar wall, wedged so deeply it seems placed there intentionally rather than forgotten. The leather cover is cracked, softened with age, and the pages inside are yellowed and brittle, carrying the scent of damp earth and something metallic that reminds Elias of the strange warmth he feels beneath the floorboards. The handwriting is shaky and uneven, as though written by someone whose hands trembled not from age but from fear. Elias begins reading by lantern light, his pulse quickening with each fragmented sentence that reveals far more than anyone in the family has ever dared to speak. The diary does not start with explanations. It begins with warnings. The great-grandfather writes of nights filled with rumbling beneath the house, of a presence that grew restless if left unwatched, of something the Holloways trapped in the soil long before the current house existed. Elias reads slowly, trying to make sense of the vague but ominous references. Phrases like "the thing we buried" and "the humming beneath the boards" send a chill across his skin. His great-grandfather describes a terror he could not articulate fully, something he and his brothers helped conceal beneath layers of dirt and stone after an incident so horrific that the family swore never to speak of it again. Elias can tell the old man wanted to forget what happened but could not, and the diary becomes a way of confessing his fear while pretending he wasn't leaving behind a map for a curious descendant. As he reads further, Elias notices entries that describe the earliest version of the cellar sleeping rule. According to the diary, the sons were required to sleep underground not for discipline or tradition but because the thing below responded differently to the presence of Holloway blood. The sons were meant to keep watch without knowing they were doing it, acting as living lids on whatever stirred beneath. The warmth Elias feels beneath the floorboards is not a new development, it has always been there, waiting for each generation of boys to sense it in their own time. The diary explains that the great-grandfather helped design the cellar to mask the original chamber, adding layers of flooring to hide the door that should never be found. But he also admits his fear that someday the wood would weaken, or a boy would become too curious, and the secret would rise again. The most chilling entry comes near the end, where the great-grandfather writes that the thing buried below is not dead and never was. It is watching. It is listening. And it remembers every Holloway son who has ever slept above it, waiting for the one who will finally open the way back to the world it once knew. Focuses on the night of the storm, the moment when nature itself seems to conspire with the secret buried beneath the Holloway house, shaking loose what generations hoped would remain sealed forever. The storm begins like any other, rumbling clouds rolling in over the valley, distant thunder echoing through the woods, but as it grows, Elias senses an intensity that feels almost intentional. The wind rises sharply, bending trees at unnatural angles, and rain lashes the farmhouse in heavy sheets that blur the windows into smears of grey. The woods surrounding the property howl as if alive, and every crash of thunder feels as though it strikes directly beneath the cellar rather than in the sky above. Elias sits upright on his narrow mattress, gripping the lantern as shadows writhe along the walls, shifting with each pulse of lightning. He has weathered storms before, but this one feels different, almost synchronized with the throb beneath the floorboards he has grown too familiar with. As the storm intensifies, the cellar grows warmer in a way that defies explanation. The air feels charged, thick with a pressure that tightens Elias's chest. He notices the warm patch of floor glowing faintly under the lantern light, not visibly but in the way it draws the eye and seems to radiate energy into the room. The vibrations he usually feels at night grow stronger, no longer subtle tremors but forceful, steady pulses that travel through the ground and up the stone walls. The thunder outside seems to answer these pulses, the crashes arriving in a rhythm that mirrors the heartbeat beneath the floor. Elias realizes with a jolt of fear that the storm isn't disturbing the thing underground. The storm is waking it. A sudden blast of wind rattles the cellar door upstairs, and the lights flicker. Elias's lantern flutters, throwing the room into a frantic dance of light and shadow. He hears a cracking sound beneath the mattress, a deep, slow splitting noise that comes from the floor itself. He leaps up and watches as the warm patch warps ever so slightly, the wood bulging upward under pressure. The beam of his lantern reveals a thin crack forming across the plank, a jagged line opening like a wound. The pulse beneath it quickens, no longer steady but urgent, and Elias's breath catches as he realizes the thing below might be pushing against the barrier that has held it for decades. The storm roars louder, slamming against the house with a force that makes dust rain from the ceiling. Outside, branches snap in the wind, hitting the exterior walls like skeletal fingers. The crack widens with each tremor, revealing a sliver of rusted metal beneath the wood. Elias stumbles back, gripping the lantern tighter, heart pounding as he recognizes the shape of a handle, the handle of a hidden door that every Holloway son was warned never to find. The storm rages, the ground shakes, and Elias understands with terrifying clarity that the moment the family has feared for generations has finally arrived. Revolves around Elias finally uncovering the hidden door beneath the cellar floor, a moment that turns years of whispered warnings and uneasy nights into a tangible, unavoidable reality. After weeks of observing the strange warmth and rhythmic pulsing beneath the boards, and following the storm that loosened the wood enough to expose a faint crack, Elias's curiosity overwhelms the instinctive fear that has gripped him since he first entered the cellar. The metal handle beneath the split plank is corroded with age, encrusted with layers of dirt and grime that suggest it has not been touched in decades. He hesitates, hand hovering above the cold metal, aware that this single action is the crossing of a line his ancestors spent lifetimes enforcing. Every instinct screams to step back, to leave it alone, to obey the unspoken rule every Holloway son has followed, but the pull of the unknown is irresistible, as though the thing beneath has been waiting for him to find it all along. As Elias pulls on the handle, it resists at first, the rusted mechanism groaning like a creature disturbed from slumber. The sound echoes in the cellar, mingling with the lingering memory of the storm and the faint hum that has always lived beneath the boards. Slowly, the door lifts, revealing darkness that seems to stretch farther than the boundaries of the house itself, a void swallowing the light from his lantern in greedy shadows. The air that rises from the opening is damp, earthy, and carries a faint metallic tang, a scent that makes Elias's stomach turn and his skin prickle with cold anticipation. For the first time, he realizes the cellar is not merely a basement for sleeping, it is a threshold, a thin barrier between the familiar world above and something entirely different, something alive and waiting below. The moment is both thrilling and terrifying. The diary entries of his great-grandfather come rushing back, the warnings, the references to the thing we buried, the fearful insistence that the sons of Holloway must act as guardians without understanding the danger. Elias understands now that the pulsing warmth he has felt for weeks was the presence reacting to him, acknowledging his curiosity, perhaps even testing his resolve. The door is more than wood and metal, it is a barrier, a lid holding something bound for generations. And now, for the first time, it yields, responding to human touch and the inevitable curiosity that his family has always tried to suppress. Elias leans closer, lantern shaking in his grasp, heart hammering in rhythm with the pulsing beneath. The cellar seems to hold its breath, the familiar sounds of the house above fading into insignificance. Every creak, every whisper of wind, every distant crash of the storm is swallowed by the vast, unknown darkness beyond the threshold. The hidden door is no longer a secret, it is a gateway, a revelation that the Holloway family's tradition was never about discipline or fear, but about containment. And as he peers into the blackness, Elias feels the weight of generations pressing down on him, the responsibility of the secret he was never meant to uncover settling like cold stone in his chest. Explores the immediate and terrifying consequences of Elias discovering the hidden door, particularly the way his family reacts when he dares to confront them about it. The moment he mentions the handle, the rusted metal beneath the warped wood, his father's reaction is instantaneous and chilling. A sudden tension fills the room, and for the first time, Elias sees a vulnerability in the stern, controlled figure he has always known. His father's face goes pale, lips tightening until they nearly disappear into his skin, eyes darting toward the cellar floor as if measuring an invisible threat. The air grows thick with unspoken dread, and the silence that follows his words feels heavier than the storm that had shaken the house days before. It is not anger that his father shows, nor disappointment, but a fear so raw that it leaves Elias momentarily paralyzed, realizing that whatever lies beneath the boards is more dangerous than he had ever imagined. His father warns him quickly, almost breathlessly, to never touch the door again, using words that sound more like a plea than an order. "You mustn't," he says, voice trembling under a veneer of authority. "It's not for us to open. It's not safe." The phrasing is peculiar, the emphasis on "not for us" striking Elias with an uneasy clarity. Whatever is below the cellar is something beyond the family's control, a force they are bound to respect rather than confront. When Elias presses for an explanation, his father's hands tremble as he clenches the edge of the table, a rare and unnerving display of weakness. His mother, who has always been silent, finally looks at him, eyes wide and haunted, her lips parting briefly as if to warn him, but no words come. She turns away, retreating to the kitchen as though the act of acknowledging the secret might make it real, and the weight of generations' fear settles on Elias with suffocating intensity. Elias begins to understand that the rules the family has followed for centuries were never arbitrary. The cellar, the hidden door, the taboo against curiosity, all of it was a containment strategy, a fragile barrier maintaining a balance no one fully comprehended. The previous generations knew that any breach could awaken the danger below, a reality that had been quietly enforced through ritual, fear, and silent compliance. Every warning, every hushed admonition, every subtle shift in tone from his parents carries the weight of history, the unspoken knowledge that the cellar is both prison and protector. The pulsing beneath the floorboards now feels more insistent, as if the presence itself recognizes that its threshold has been disturbed, and Elias realizes that the family's panic is not over a secret merely kept, it is a secret that has always been alive, waiting, and far from inert. The cellar has shifted from a place of containment to a place of confrontation, and Elias understands with growing dread that the moment he touched the door, the centuries-old balance began to tilt. Focuses on Elias's fateful decision to descend into the hidden chamber beneath the cellar, a choice driven by a mixture of fear, curiosity, and a sense of inevitability. Despite his father's urgent warnings and the heavy weight of generations' unspoken fears, Elias cannot ignore the pull of the unknown. Every night he spends in the cellar, the vibrations beneath the floorboards grow stronger, almost communicative, as if beckoning him closer. The warmth he has long felt intensifies near the hidden door, and the shadows in the corners of the room seem to lean toward the crack, stretching and twisting as if urging him to take the final step. The pull becomes unbearable, a magnetic insistence that leaves him restless and haunted during every hour he spends above ground, his dreams crowded with shapes he cannot name and whispers that echo in the spaces between his thoughts. On the chosen night, Elias prepares himself with nothing but a lantern and a thin blanket, his hands trembling as he secures the handle of the hidden door. The metal is cold under his fingers, the rust and grit scraping lightly against his skin, yet he cannot pull away. He pauses, listening to the familiar pulse beneath the floorboards, now louder and more deliberate than ever, matching the rhythm of his own heartbeat. The cellar seems to contract around him, the stone walls pressing inward, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something older, something that has waited far too long for a visitor. Every instinct screams to retreat, to obey the rules that have governed Holloway sons for generations, but Elias's curiosity overrides fear, and with a slow, deliberate motion, he begins to lift the lantern and descend. The steps creak beneath him, each one sounding impossibly loud in the oppressive darkness. The chamber below is larger than he anticipated, carved into the soil with precise, unnatural geometry that hints at hands far more deliberate than the family's own. The air grows colder with each step, carrying the metallic, earthy scent that has haunted him for weeks. Shadows cling to the walls, moving in ways that defy logic, stretching and curling as if alive. The pulse he has felt through the floorboards now resonates in the air around him, a deep, omnipresent thrum that reverberates through the bones of his body. He feels watched, and the sensation is so intense that it is almost physical, a presence coiled and aware just beyond the reach of his lantern's light. Elias realizes that the cellar, the hidden door, and the generations of Holloway sons were never merely traditions, they were guardianship, a duty to contain something far older and more dangerous than anyone had ever explained. The moment he steps fully into the chamber, he knows with a certainty that chills him to the marrow that his life, and the legacy of his family, will be irrevocably altered by what lies waiting below, and the pulse beneath him now feels not just alive but expectant, as if recognizing the one who has finally crossed the line his ancestors could never allow to be crossed. Delves into the shocking and terrifying revelation of what lies beneath the Holloway cellar, the chamber that has been carefully hidden for generations and that now confronts Elias with a presence far older and more intelligent than he could have imagined. As he steps fully into the underground space, the air grows heavy, thick with the scent of wet earth, rust, and something far more elusive, a faint metallic tang mixed with the faintest hint of decay that suggests the chamber has been undisturbed for decades, if not centuries. The walls are carved from soil and rock with an unsettling precision, forming a series of jagged tunnels and alcoves that seem almost organic, as though the chamber itself is alive, breathing around him. The lantern light flickers, casting shadows that move in impossible ways, giving the impression that unseen eyes are following him, studying him as carefully as he studies the space around him. At the center of the chamber, Elias notices a large, irregular pit, partially concealed by loose stones and remnants of old wooden beams. From its depths rises a subtle vibration that he recognizes instantly, stronger than the pulsing he has felt through the floorboards, a slow, patient rhythm that seems to be counting his presence, measuring his courage. He senses immediately that this is not merely an animal or natural phenomenon. Whatever resides here possesses awareness, waiting, and perhaps even intent. The writings in his great-grandfather's diary begin to take shape in his mind, the cryptic references to the thing we buried suddenly horrifyingly literal. He realizes the cellar above has not been a sleeping area for convenience, but a careful containment system, a barrier keeping this presence restrained, the entire family's compliance and fear acting as an extension of its prison. As Elias moves closer to the pit, he notices faint traces along the chamber walls, scratches, marks, and stains that speak of movement and struggle long past. The air pulses with an energy that is simultaneously inviting and repelling, an invisible force that tugs at his attention while warning him to stop. He feels the weight of generations of Holloway sons pressing down on him, a burden of secrecy and responsibility passed silently from father to son, the tradition of cellar sleeping suddenly made horrifyingly clear. The presence beneath the house is aware of him, and though it does not move in the conventional sense, Elias can feel its intent, a patient intelligence that acknowledges his arrival, measuring him as a potential participant in the legacy his family has safeguarded. Every instinct screams to flee, yet a strange, irresistible compulsion holds him in place. The chamber seems to expand, as if the walls themselves are breathing, and Elias realizes with dawning terror that what lies here is not inert, not bound by wood or stone. It is waiting, alive in a way that defies natural law, and it has always been waiting for a Holloway son bold or curious enough to descend fully into the darkness. The realization crushes him with both dread and awe. The cellar was never a prison for boys, but a lid on something ancient, intelligent, and dangerous, a truth that the family has kept secret at every cost, now staring directly at the one who has finally uncovered it.